Real conversations, real solutions, real success. Success is my religion.
You gotta say that. So I'm here with Tracy Green. We met in an Uber ride, and y'all know I do Uber on the side, and I meet fascinating people, and I want to get her insight on her past and kind of the struggles she went through as she was growing up, and now she's an accomplished professional, and we just want to hear about all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, first of all. It's a big privilege. I'll give you a little bit of my background then. Born and raised in Kansas, rural Kansas, about 40 minutes north of Topeka. And so very much grew up in a area of the country that I think a lot of people would almost consider uninhabited.
Uninhabited? Oh, wow.
But not really. There are definitely people out there. It's just maybe a forgotten segment of the world, which there's a lot of those in America that don't get the publicity or that people think about, especially with social media these days. People live in cities, and it's easy to forget that there's a whole other side of the world. For me, in a lot of ways, it was very idyllic. I have parents who are still lovingly married to this day. They still own the childhood home that I grew up in, so I didn't have that military experience of relocating place to place or anything like that. One of my best friends, I've known her since kindergarten. We live 10 minutes away from each other here in Kansas City. So it's one of those things that the importance of early relationships and friendships was really impressed upon me based upon that society, that little section of America where you can create really close relationships because there's not a lot of other things to take your attention away from it. Likewise, I felt like I was very academically focused in school, but the truth of the matter is that it wasn't particularly difficult for me. I didn't have any educational struggles in my primary education, and that meant that there was never a question, are you going to college? It's like when you go to college. And when you become a teacher, which is what originally I had thought that I wanted to do, was go into primary education and work with high schoolers. There was never a question of any of that. And then I graduated high school and I went out to college in Fort Hays, which is even further into western Kansas. And I was struck with challenges for the first time in my life, really,
because school was so easy.
It was so easy. I'd never studied for a test, including my ACTs and SATs. I always went in with the thought process that, whatever happens is what happens, and that I'd be fine with that. Very unrealistic because, all it takes is one failure for you to be like, wow, was not prepared for that. And that's definitely what happened in college. Was I started taking classes that were challenging me and forcing me to go to the library. And I remember I failed out of calculus the first time, and I was like, no big deal, this happens. It happens to people occasionally.
Right.
And I took it that second semester and didn't quite learn that lesson because then I failed out of it a second semester. And as I was getting ready to enroll to take it over the summer course, I had a realization that, wow, if I'm going to have to take some of these courses 2 or 3 times, this is going to get really expensive.
Right.
Another area of my life that I'd been very blessed in is that both my parents worked. We were pretty well-to-do in our teeny tiny neighborhood, so I didn't have to worry about financial stability in my life. And then I'm paying for my own because my older brother had his loans and everything, and my parents had signed off on that, and they were very transparent. They're like, hey, we did that for Travis, probably not going to do that for you, to take on more debt for that, but you'll be fine, you've got a good head on your shoulders. Little did they know I didn't have a good head on my shoulders. It took a lot of trial and error. I really had to knuckle down and learn to study, and I'd love to say that I did it that third semester and I really figured it out. I didn't. I still didn't know how to do it, and it felt insurmountable that nobody was able to teach me that. And I really struggled.
Teach you what?
To, to put aside things of your personal interests and get into a mindset of focus and learn, and how do I
sacrifice
how do I take the knowledge in the book and make that my knowledge? It's always just been, I listened to a lecture and it was ingrained into me. I'm very much, I thought I was an audio learner. So then I was like, oh, all I have to do is go to these classes, right? And that will really be the foundation. Maybe I skipped too many classes that first semester. That's on me. I'll just go to the classes. And it really quickly became no, I just don't understand this concept. And that was very new to me, to the point that I'd never really I'd never had something explained to me multiple times and then been like, I still don't get this. And additionally, like many people at the age of 18, I didn't really have this certainty in my mindset that I wanted to be a teacher. I just thought that was something I would enjoy. We have a lot of teachers in my family. I felt a calling, if you want to say that, to continue that legacy in some way. And then I took an educations class, and I was like, oh, this is not for me. I'm not
what made
cut
you
out for
think that? Was it standing up in front of the class?
No, that part was easy. It was there were so many parts of it that went into it. I think still to this day, a part of it is definitely the way that teachers are looked upon in the community. There's a lot of responsibility thrust upon educators without the respect that I think responsibility should come hand in hand with. Very much, I took a class on elementary education, and the first week of that class, they actually had us go to a kindergarten classroom, and I was like, this is a nightmare. These children are all over the place, and half of them are coming in, they don't know their ABCs or anything like that. And again, from a place of complete privilege, my parents spent time with us to make sure that we had basic knowledge gaps filled for that before we went off to school. Again, at that time, at 18, 19, I didn't know that was my privilege. I was just shocked by the state of these classrooms.
So did your friends have both parents in the household too? I
think I had a combination of that, but I would say that my closest friends, yeah, they did. They actually did have both parents in the classroom. There was also a focus on education.
Right.
Not necessarily that they all had secondary education like my parents did, but that they were there was an emphasis on the importance of it. My best friend, she was valedictorian, but my other two really good friends, we were all in honors society and top 10% of the class or whatever. I think, and again, it probably just came easier to us in a lot of ways than for other students, and some of that has a lot to do with the emphasis of our parents. But also all our parents worked and were, there was definitely a focus to the importance of education. So I definitely think that was part of it. But I was just shocked by the state of classrooms in America. Again, growing up in a really idyllic sort of small town community.
Yeah, She grew up in rural,
Right.
rural Kansas.
Exactly. I think I had 88 students in my graduating class. At max, we were probably at 100, just shy of that. You know, and then some people have kids, and some people transfer, and some people just don't pass. And so, like, at some point, we just got down into those 80 numbers, but we always stayed like that. I was also very social in the sense that I knew everybody by name. So you have kind of that side of it. So when you're starting to see education from the classroom in larger cities that don't have the same level of community investment or don't have financial investment from the state levels, and you're starting to see what that looks like, you very quickly go, oh, it's important, but not important enough that people are paying for it.
Right.
The investment's not there. And I think that's what I was saying before, as far as like the importance of like respect and responsibility being tied together into that it's just kind of missing. And we're seeing that very much on a global scale in our country. Specifically, I don't need to explain that to you. You know firsthand how it is. But I really pulled away from that very quickly, and I thought, oh well, maybe secondary education could be something I was interested in. And then I found out that a lot of places expect you to have a master's degree for that. I was already not doing well in primary college. I wasn't gonna take a master's degree. Right. I had zero interest in that. And so then that kind of made me go, well, maybe education's not for you. Maybe I'll transfer into business. And all of this is like a very well thought out way that I'm explaining it to you. But as a 19-year-old, it was like a month of this, a month of this, a month of this. And I think I changed majors 6 times in the course of like a year and a half. And thankfully, the way that my college had done like mentorship and having a advisor for you, I had kept my advisor for a good chunk of that. And I remember I went in on a...
Keep talking.
Yeah, you're fine. I remember I went in for a session, a meetup session, and I was getting ready to be like, hey, Spanish isn't for me. I'm going to change my major again. And as I was getting like geared up to say that, he just like leaned across the table and kind of put his hand in front of me, and he was like, Tracy, do you ever think you're maybe not ready for college? Or like maybe college isn't the place for you.
Right.
And maybe you just need to take a step back and figure out who you are, and then you can come back to this. And that was the first time anybody had ever said to me, if this isn't working, don't do it. Because like I said, it was never are you going to college? It's when you go to college in our household. It was never if you want to be a teacher.
Sorry.
You're fine.
If you want to be a teacher.
If you want to be a teacher, you will be a teacher. It was like always this thought of completion.
Just go ahead and go with it. Go with the flow.
Right, exactly. Because life is going to lead you to that path eventually. Mm-hmm. And, it did eventually come back around to that. We can get into that at a different point. But, yeah, I really, really struggled in college. I didn't know what to do with it. And to have somebody that I trusted and respected say to me, maybe you should take a step away. That was the first time that I was like, oh, and it's okay. That's okay. I can do that. And I did. I stepped away. I worked a couple jobs. I ended up moving to Europe. I lived there for about a year and, worked and got to travel and see a lot of the world, and it helped me gain immense perspective. Mm-hmm. And then I came back to the Midwest and went in to get my degree, and I ended up getting a degree in hotel and restaurant management because I had got to see a lot of tourism, something that Kansas has almost nothing in the way of tourism. maybe that's unfair. We don't have promoted tourism really in Kansas. And yeah, I came back and got knuckled down, worked a full-time job and took classes, had zero issue, had learned how to like focus myself and be able to study. But all that took was time and passion to step away and really figure out who I was as a person.
How did that conversation go when you brought that up to your parents?
Oh, wow. Incredibly blessed, as I've already said, the privilege of having two parents who very much were loving and supportive and involved with you, but also maybe somewhere on the spectrum of autism to say, like, no, black and white, you're going to school. I was terrified of the whole prospect of, like, going to them and saying, like, hey, I'm dropping out of college.
Yeah.
But God bless my mom, I came to her on a Mother's Day weekend. We were here in Kansas City visiting my dad's side of the family, and I just had a really frank conversation. I was like, hey, I had a hard time and how I've been taking this semester off to work, and I was planning to go back for the summer semester. I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to move to Europe. And just kind of like close my eyes and hope that it wasn't going to be this explosion, which was so irrational because my parents have never been explosive in their emotions. They're very much quiet, reticent people to think through those things. But I was just prepared for it to be this whole ordeal. And my mom was like, okay, and when will you go back to school? And I was like, oh, I don't have a timeline, but I will go back to school because very much in the early 2000s, when this is taking place, education is the only way, or it's the only emphasized way in our society. Mm-hmm. So I knew I had to go back because that piece of paper was more important to employers than who you are as a person. I think we're seeing a change in that slowly but surely. But I think at the time it was like a no-brainer. It's like, yeah, you can take a few years off, but you're going to have to get that piece of paper eventually.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So when you look at education, mm-hmm. and we came from an era where education was pretty much the only way you mm-hmm. could go ahead and move up or move out. You still need to get those skills that you got mm-hmm. when you went to college, right?
I think.
How do you do that too?
Right. I think that to answer your question, I think it depends on the industry that you're wanting to go into. I think it depends on your goals as far as what you want to achieve in your life. But I do think that change has occurred in this country in a way that maybe we weren't anticipating. Example of this, my brother, incredibly educated man, has 2 bachelors, 3 minors, and then a master's degree. He's an over-the-road truck driver. So, and he loves it. Yeah. He's so proud that he does it, and we're proud of him. He's like really doing a great amount of work, and he's happy with his work, and it's financially beneficial to him in a way that a lot of his corporate experiences hadn't been. Did he need to go to school for all that? Absolutely not. And he's really in a secure place because in the truck driving industry, like, it's something like in the 70 percentile or like high 60s of people that are going to be retiring from that in the next 10 years. So like he's going to just have so much opportunity of growth. Now he went through and got education related to that after the fact, but it was like a 6-week program, and then you do like buddy driving with a mentor for like another 3 weeks, and then you have your own truck and you're driving around. Every company is different, and there's a lot of companies out there that sponsor and pay for that education, but I don't think we do a well enough job in primary education explaining to kids that things like that are an option. My high school had a VOTEC partnership where you could drive, I think it's like the 40 minutes into the city from where I lived, to take morning classes from a vocational school if that was something that you wanted to do. I never did that because it meant giving up certain classes that I really was enjoying, like art and music and things that were absolutely not going to do anything for me in college. But it wasn't impressed upon me that would be important. But there were a lot of kids from my school that went and did, like they did their primary courses for nursing, or they did their primary courses for oil rig working, like welding and stuff like that. Those people were launched into a career in like 3 years, and had like within the amount of time that I was flunking out of college, they were already like making 6 figures doing what I think a lot of people would consider as blue collar work. I think it's so important to remember that like the engineering is great, but electricians, plumbers, people in construction, those jobs are always going to be there. The market doesn't affect them as much.
Those are the biggest entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
People are always talking about entrepreneurship and this and that, like selling products or whatever, but you see like we have like at least 5 different big plumbing and HVAC companies
here in Kansas City. Absolutely.
So those are entrepreneurship opportunities, and they're going to be entrepreneurs for a long time. The entrepreneurs in maybe the tech world or the product world, they may have a lot of ups and downs, but
and
they're going to be considered.
We can see already, having lived through the journey of technology as it has currently been, that you have to be constantly able to move, but the pipes haven't changed that much. Maybe the product they're made out of has changed, but like the way you plumb a house has been the same since the 70s. The way you do electricity has been the same since we did the 90s. Maybe we have more safety protocols in place for like breaker boxes and stuff like that. But those skills have only changed in minor ways. And what I think is important to remember is that you can become a very well-trained professional in those fields and still then go to college and get a business degree after the fact. But one of the best parts of like having such a struggle there in my late teens, early 20s was to go back to school then in my mid-20s and feel so much more confident in the person that I was, that I didn't need to struggle with the social aspect of it. I don't think we put enough education into that, as far as like, hey, college is going to be hard for multiple reasons. Not just because, the education level is different, but also because nobody's there holding your hand, making sure you get out of bed in the morning. You have to worry about your own food. Also, for many people, you're going to be in a completely different social circle than you've ever been before. I made all new friends. I didn't have a single person from my graduating class that went to the same college that I went to. I would never have seen them. That is there, and there are certain people that have maybe some security built in. I think of like people who go on scholarships for sports you kind of have that team
Yeah.
philosophy, and you can really like make closer connections quickly because you have something like that. You hear a lot of people complain about how hard it is to make friends when you're an adult later on in your like 30s. We're not trauma bonding like in the same way that you are in your early 20s, and I don't think that people realize that that's what's happening. But like, you know, you're all out there trying to struggle and figure it out figure out adulthood together, and that allows you kind of a path to make connections, very strong connections, very quickly. That's why I always tell all of the kids in my life, I'm like, hey, live in the dorms, because you're all going to struggle through that together, and it's going to create relationships for you. If you live off campus, because maybe you have some like social anxiety and stuff like that, and you have the blessing of being able to afford to live off campus in a lot of ways, you're going to miss that opportunity, and that puts you into a position where you're forcing yourself to make connections in the classroom, which is not as challenging in the sense of like how you're bonding together, but it is harder to be like, hey, I know we sit next to each other for a whole semester, but like if you ever wanted to get coffee or something, it's much harder. It's the same way as like as an adult, if you see somebody who's reading a book in a coffee shop, you don't just go up to them and go, hey, I loved that book. Like, only extreme extroverts, which I would probably be called by a lot of my friends. Yeah, a lot of my friends think I am. I've surrounded myself with a very tight knit of introverts, so being just slightly extroverted gives me a little bit of a leg up there. But I think it's just, you know, outside of our social norms to like address somebody in that way, to just walk up to them and start a conversation and then be like, we're friends now. We had one conversation. We're friends now. But when you're 19, 20 and you meet in the dorms and you run into them one time in a hallway, suddenly we are friends. Like, it's just a different experience.
They have events and things that are going on.
Yeah, they cultivate it. Yeah, they cultivate it.
And that's what I tell my students. I'm like, live in the dorms. Don't push that experience away, because that's one of the most valuable experiences. Is that you're close to campus. You can get to the library. You can get to the dining hall. You can get to all of these places without having to have that barrier of commute.
Yes.
and plus you want to be on campus to get some of those responsibilities, those maybe I was an RA, so.
And opportunities. Yeah, absolutely. I have a good friend, lives here in Kansas City now, but when we went to college together, he worked the front desk in the dorms, and then by his junior year he was an RA and was working with these younger, you know, freshmen who were coming in, but also had a housing already taken care of because he's working for the dorm system. By the time he was ready to graduate college, he didn't have to have part-time jobs the way that a lot of us did, because he already had that on his resume. It was built out to say like managed, you know, like 5 floors of a dorm with like 80 kids per floor, and like it's all built out there, and a lot of companies really like responded to that sort of view of leadership, and it's all built in to the experience of living on campus. Yeah. So I couldn't say more good things about it.
And what about coasting?
Oh, yeah, to just become comfortable and like continue through. I mean, honestly, that's how I thought that college was going to be for me. And I would say that the first year and a half I did just coast. I wouldn't, by no means was I like a partier. You know, I didn't spend every evening out at some like dorm party. No, I was just comfortable with the lifestyle I'd always had of education levels that I thought that was going to carry me through. For me, I very quickly learned that it didn't. Some people do, like, coast through. The problem with coasting, or however you want to describe, not pushing yourself to try uncomfortable things. For me, it took a long time to really understand this lesson, but discomfort is where we grow. If you never force yourself to examine why you feel so comfortable in a place, you will never grow from that place. And you're really pigeonholing yourself into certain mindsets or certain routines that don't need to, they're not bad.
They might not benefit you later on in life.
They might not be bad, but like, think how much better you could be if you really examine.
Challenge yourself.
Right. I will say the one thing that I appreciate, and maybe Gen Z, Gen Alpha wouldn't agree with me, but from a millennial aspect, is we've always been pushing forward on a certain trajectory that's been involved with, like, the changes in the economy, the changes in our social parameters, the changes in technology. All that is kind of like forcing us in a forward momentum. But as a generation, we've taken a lot of control by doing a lot of self-reflection. I obviously I'm generalizing. There's a lot of people who could do with some more self-reflection in their life. But I think that we've done a really good job of sitting back and saying, like, hey, why do my parents think that way? Or, like, am I doing that? Or, like, and part of that is that social media has, like, opened our eyes to this whole world that was outside of our purview. Your lens expands as it becomes more accessible to you.
And connected with others.
Right, exactly, connectivity. And so then you have to kind of stop and examine yourself to some extent. But the process of, like, self-examination and then being willing to pivot and make adjustments appropriately so that you can be like, oh, you know what? Humbly enough, that was my problem, or I didn't handle that situation appropriately, or, like, my parents saying something offhandedly that makes me pause or makes me uncomfortable, realizing where they're coming from and how can I better myself to be in a different mindset of that. I think that's something that a lot of people won't give to millennials, but I think we've earned it. Really we have, like, the ability to be like, hey, I don't like this one thing about me. I don't know if it's nature or nurture, I don't know, but I'm gonna figure it out. And I might do that through therapy, I might do that through self-discovery, I might make huge shifts, but making yourself realize that when you're uncomfortable, you're uncomfortable. Maybe you're making other people uncomfortable, sure, but you have to own that emotion and then being able to grow from that. And if there's anything I could pass on to, like, younger generations, it would be like, it's important to remember that even if you think you know more than me, you have to keep pushing yourself to know even more than you.
Yeah.
Because without growth, we're stagnant.
Right.
We're not getting better.
And to transition, I've been thinking, I said this for a while now, but the different generations, we have this fight in between the generations that shouldn't be going on, because the other generations should have taught us what they knew
Exactly.
with the combination of how
could you
technology
use that?
how technology can go. So, like, once we understand that, and then we tap back into like the work ethic that those people had in the past that had to do the manual labor, and then appreciate that the manual labor is what got us here today.
Yeah, the foundations that they laid. I will say that while there's so many things that you could say negatively about the older generations, I have a lot of grace for them in the sense that the world they're living in right now must be so hard for them. I think kids don't understand how quickly a year goes by, how quickly 10 years go by. I am 37 right now. I feel like I woke up from 28 and I am now 37. Like, I look back, the years of the pandemic, that was a year, not 3 or 4 years in my head. It was 2019 last year, right? No. And so I just feel like time gets away from you, especially when you're like head down in a career or trying to raise a family. And so if I feel that way now in my 20s into my 30s, I can only imagine that from their 30s to their 60s right now, it must have just happened overnight, or it must feel like it happened overnight. And then think of, that's just time. Think of all the things that changed in that time. Like, do I get frustrated that I have to teach my mom how to send a text every once in a while? Of course I do. But like, when she was my age that I am currently now, we didn't even have cell phones.
Right.
Like, you'd be lucky if you had a private landline. Yeah. Chances are, growing up where I grew up, you still had a party line where people would be on the same phone line as you. It just changes so quickly. I mean, I went off to college and had a brick phone. And then eventually,
snake on it.
Yeah, exactly. I could T9, and be walking to class. So it was a completely different situation. So I think I have a lot more grace for older generations now, especially as we're learning new things. Example, I was just on a business trip, and one of my rental cars was a Tesla. In California, most of the rental cars at this point are completely electric, based upon where their government stances are on fuel efficiency and things like that. Tesla. I don't make Tesla money. I have zero interest in that sort of tech stuff. I'd never driven one, obviously. The learning curve of driving a Tesla, wow. And also, just things that you take for granted in a car, like taking your foot off the accelerator and slowly decelerating. In an electric car, it doesn't work like that. You take the foot off the accelerator, you stop.
Yeah.
You have to lighten acceleration, not just stop accelerating. So anyways, a lot of struggles. I went through the whole bell curve of change. In the span of a weekend.
Yeah.
Where I was irrationally angry because I was confused and it felt like there was no way to learn this, and then upset that they don't do it a certain way, this would have made more sense, right. Thinking a little bit better than that, and then the denial of being it's not that I don't know, it's just, it's hard, it is hard, and then finally coming all the way around to acceptance, where I was you know what, this isn't that bad, I could figure this out, but from where you end on acceptance and being you know what, a Tesla's not that hard, to where I'd started less than 48 hours beforehand of being this is the worst car I've ever driven.
I think people are, if we come in with a growth mindset and always willing to learn.
Yes.
Technology is advancing, and technology isn't just the computers and things like that. It's just everything that is more efficient.
Yeah.
And once it becomes more efficient, we still have to learn what that efficiency is and how it's going to help us be better human beings and better able to live our lives and in the
think-
way where we want to live.
I think the other side of that is like being willing to change, knowing that like you yourself are going to be faced every day with something brand new, or you could be if you put yourself into the right scenarios. And knowing, not necessarily knowing, and being willing to open yourself up to differences.
That's crazy because in my philosophy for individual achievement, the W in the philosophy is willingness.
Yes.
It opens you up to the possibilities of whatever it is that you want.
I think that that's the difference that I see right now, especially, not to get into too much about politics, but like with conservatism, the unwillingness to hear another side. And I think it's not just on one side of the house, obviously, it's across the board. But like, there's a segment of the population that are so assuredly certain that their point of view is right that they're not willing to hear any other options. I have always been told, always come to the table with the understanding that there could be a better way to do something. My father is an engineer. He worked on building computer pieces for computers that he couldn't even afford to buy for a good majority of his workforce time. He is such an intelligent man that I think it really is hard for him to be open to the possibility that there could be someone out there who has a better way of doing something. And I would love to say that would apply only to his engineering side of his brain, but unfortunately it's such an ingrained mindset for him that it is everything, where you have to be like, well, actually, if you don't mind me giving an opinion here, like sharing something new with him. And it's so interesting to watch the effect that it has on him, where he fights maybe that logical side of his brain that goes, oh, that does sound like it could be a better way, but it can't be better than what I already know, and I'm right. And then to slowly see perhaps acceptance come into play and be like, well, maybe Tracy is right for once in her life.
Right. We all go through that with our parents.
And I love them to death. I would never, this is not me bashing them at all. It's just that they worked so hard to earn a place at the table and the respect of their elders that it's almost hard for them to give it back up in some way. Despite the fact that I don't think they really want the responsibility anymore. I think that's what's crazy, is that people are talking about, like the boomers being like, the majority of like the political power in the world, the majority of the wealth in the world. I kind of think they all just want to retire and not think about anything ever again. But unfortunately, like giving up that power is almost harder than the desire to want to not do it anymore.
Because they know it's going to change much.
Because then the other side of that is, okay, well, but they'll do something new, and that means I have to learn it.
Yeah.
And that sounds really hard.
Yeah. And I'm comfortable with it.
But again, as we said before, comfort is stagnant.
Comfort is failing us.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of students that they just want to be comfortable, but they come from a disadvantaged background. So you're going to have to work even harder to understand and get the money or get to a place of stability.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to tell my students. Like I'm still trying to get to stability.
Yeah.
And I'm 40 and a half.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a constant struggle when, like, I'm not saying that just because of my age that I know more than my students,
No, but like
but I have a lot of experiences that I made the connections for you to not have to struggle like I did.
Right.
So let me teach you this.
Yeah.
And pass it on so
Right.
that you don't have to struggle like this. So, like, I'm going to talk to you about your relationship with your parents and what is going on in your household, what is going on in this school, and when you come into my area, this is how we act, because we can't be like everybody else, and I can only help change a certain amount of people that are willing to change. And that's where I get frustrated, because like I'm like, and it's a honest frustration because they just don't know,
Right.
and they don't understand, because that is a part of their environment is.
You know, I would never shame a parent for hiding certain things from their children. I think that's the job of parents in a lot of ways, is to mentor and lead, but then also shelter. But I do think that like there's a disservice being done to your children if you hide for them some of your struggles. I'm not saying that they need to know how much, you know, Christmas cost every year, but knowing that like how hard you as a parent are working to provide them something, I think that just leaves so much room for appreciation. My father traveled a lot for work, and so he would be very much absent. My brother is 5 years older than me, so for a good chunk of my puberty, I was in the house with my mom when she was home from work. So because, and this is for definitely something for kids to realize, you put on a mask all day at school, right? What are the social expectations, what your teachers expect from you, what you, want society to see from you, these friends, it's hard. And you get to a point in the day where you just can't do that anymore. So when you get home to your safe space, you take off that mask and you're as mean and angry as you wanted to be all day long, especially as a teenage girl. And unfortunately, that means that the person who saw that side of me the most was the person doing the most for me. And that was my mom. So she was like also coming home from work and her social responsibilities and the mask that she wears all day long. And so it was just like immediate knockdown, drag out, screaming fights every evening. And she had so much grace for that. Like, to the point that I don't think she even knew why it was always happening, but that she was like, unconditionally, I love you. You're my daughter. You are grounded for 2 weeks. You will not speak to me that again in my home like that. But, she was so willing to take that abuse from me every day and never pointing it out that it was out of control. It took me so many more years. I think I was like 25 and I sat down with her and I was just like, I'm so sorry that I was so terrible to you, that I had no emotional intelligence at that point to be able to reflect and release that in a healthy way, and knowing how much she was probably shielding me from, like, as far as like the struggles that she was having with my dad being out of the house and traveling for work, and knowing that she was commuting like an hour and a half both ways to get to work, and all these additional things that she herself was struggling with. And I just, like, it's sad that it's hindsight 2020 for those things, and that you're not able to, like, in that moment pivot. If I could give anything to any person, any youth right now, it would be like, examine yourself on a daily basis. Like, whether that's journaling or just thinking it out loud. I do a lot of my best like self-examination driving, like where I'm just kind of thinking through like, oh, how did I handle that meeting, or could I have had that client interact in a different way? But like, take the time, be willing to admit that you're wrong, and be willing to then pivot, because that's growth. If you're not growing, you're actually dying. Yeah, exactly. You're falling behind. Yeah. Like, if we're not growing, stagnatism is just the beginning of death. Like, you have to be in a position where you're willing for that change to happen.
And you got to go out and experience things as a young person. Go experience everything that you can as a young person with the notion that you're going to work at whatever and commit. You're committed, and you're going to work for that opportunity, even though it doesn't yield a reward. It may not yield a reward, but it's going to help you in the long run if you take that what's the word? the not intensity, but I can't think of. Oh man, just that commitment to do it on a day-to-day basis, every day, years at a time, because you don't know when your success is going to come. And the average time for a success is about 10 to 20 years is when you're going to actually see the fruits of your labor come. And
well, that's a little fun fact from the hospitality world is if you started a restaurant today, you will fail for at least 3 years. Most companies, I have a good friend who is a very quote-unquote successful juicing and smoothie business out of Denver. They're still not out of the red, and they've been at it for 10 years. It's a challenge, but like, you have to be willing to fail, but also changes for success.
Yeah.
So like, something's not working, change vendors. Something's not working, review the books. You have to be in that position for change to happen, and to realize that failure is part of it, and you might not see the hard work pay off immediately.
Right.
But it's coming. It just takes time.
So we didn't really get into the the corporate world.
Oh, but, sure.
Do you want to get into that?
I can. If you want to split it up, you could divide it in some way. I don't know how you would want to do that. But, so I currently work for a hospitality company who opens airport lounges. They have a primary client that runs and owns and operates those, and we just deal mostly with staffing and training. So when I said before that, like, I didn't ever see myself being in education after I started my college journey, the truth is that I've been educating since I was in my mid-20s, because I worked for a massive hospitality company, was good at my day-to-day job. When you're good at your job, you become a trainer. Like, that's the upward growth a lot of times. So
that's the next step.
That's the next step up. Also, important to become a trainer if you are good at your job, because that means you're passing on the skills to your future coworkers. If you're not training them in the ways that are successful, someone else is going to be training them in the ways that maybe irk you or are creating more work for you.
So if you cut corners, they're going to cut corners.
Yes, exactly. And if the person cutting corners that you hate working with is now the person training all future people that you work with, you're going to hate working with those people. So if you're good at your job, they're going to ask you to be a trainer. And you want to say yes to that. Even if you're not great at training, something that has taken me a long time to learn in my career path is that you can be taught how to do anything. You can learn that. People have an incredible ability to learn. Unfortunately, sometimes you learn bad habits, but you can still learn how to do anything. You can adapt to almost anything. And I think that's the greatest trait of humans, is our ability to adapt and then overcome. I think we have an immense ability to do that. That being said, you want to become the trainer in your workplace. I did that for a very large company that I'm sure most of your listeners will know, called Disney. I did that out in Florida. I worked for their lodging line of business. I went from training at the hotel I was working at to kind of like their main operations training, like all onboarding opportunities. At the time, I was very much outgrowing Orlando in the sense that, like, I wanted to make more money. Their cost of living was incredibly high. I really missed my family back in the Midwest. I hadn't taken a vacation in 4 years. Because even if you had time to take a day off, you didn't necessarily have the spending money to leave that area, which is how a lot of people get stuck places. And so I had decided that I would move back to Kansas City, back to the Midwest, and try and pursue other opportunities here in Kansas City. Leaving a large corporation without a backup plan is probably not a safe or good idea for most people. Luckily, I had a lot of support from my family. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew that I was good at training, and how do you make yourself a career out of something like that? At the time, I had zero idea what the world really looked like out there in the corporate world, because I only knew what one company did and how their structure was. But I really left myself open to the opportunities that would come my way. I started working with a locally owned salon and spa here in Kansas City, who were looking for a hiring expert, somebody who was willing to do hiring and training. They didn't have a program that was standardized, and I was coming from a background of having extremely standardized operational procedures. So I started to build them and design them a system. It really wasn't a sustainable job in the sense that, like, once the program was in place, almost anybody could operate it. And so I kind of got bored with it, and somebody had come, a recruiter had come and searched for me, and I started working in healthcare IT, training people how to use electronic medical records. And I did that for almost 10 years. 5 of it, I did it for outside of the company, like as a third party. There's a lot of money there, but not a lot of opportunity for growth. You kind of have to decide when you're a third party, am I going to focus on just making money and having a job, or am I going to look as this as an opportunity to get a better career and take another position somewhere else? The company that I was contracting for, they eventually reached out and wanted me to come into project management. And so I did that. I jumped in internal and worked in project management for the next 5 years of my career. That was beautiful in the sense that I got to not only do a lot of training, I got to look at the other side of project management as far as like assessing client needs and making sure that schedules were built appropriately, managing hundreds of trainers sometimes, dealing with clients that are overseas and other time zones, and a really great opportunity. But one of the most beneficial parts of that job was being a manager to other people and mentoring. and having that opportunity to really help them build a career, for me, that was when I was like, man, if you'd stuck with education, you might have been pretty good at it, because I really loved helping people find their way. Now, from a corporate stance, I am not a corporate girly. I don't drink the Kool-Aid. I very much am like, this company is here to do a job. It's never going to think about you, but they have a lot of tools that you can use for your betterment. And all my direct reports probably quit at some point because they were like, well, Tracy said I could be better at doing this other thing, so that's what I'm going to go do.
Yeah,
So
you gotta work them as much as they work you.
exactly, because I think the way that our economy is built, and a lot of our companies that we have in place that are very powerful, they're focused on bottom lines, and labor is just another resource to them. Whether you're skilled or unskilled, whether you're educated or uneducated, you are a part of a cog in a machine. And it took a long time of seeing people, come and go, layoffs and hirings, and just the normal ebbs and flows that are part of big business. For me to realize that in my own personal life, it helped immensely, having previously been a contractor for that company, to kind of know my worth as far as what I can bring to the table. I was never in a position where I was let go. I knew a lot of people who were unfortunately downsized at certain points, especially during that lovely pandemic time frame where, budgets are tight, companies aren't making the same amount of money. Scary stuff for a lot of people. I've been very fortunate to not be in that position, but also smart to know what I'm worth to them, and been very smart in the way that I utilize their services, whether that be
Their benefits.
Yeah, whether that be their matching 401ks, or, making the company that I worked for had a mental health policy. They paid for 12 visits to mental health professionals annually. That's a once a month situation. Why would you not take that advantage of that? The problem is that they're not like outwardly promoting that information, so you have to go out and find that stuff on your own. And the best places to ask are the people who've been there 20, 30 years. Like, go find that baby boomer that's sitting in an office somewhere and make them your mentor. Just hear what they're doing, or like talk to those people fresh out of college that I read all the fine print before I signed the contract. Okay, great. What should I know? What do I not know that you know about it? Again, we've talked about being open to change, but do the sleuth work, put on the investigator hat, figure out what you can get out of these companies. Don't just rest on your own laurels. Exactly. Because if you're just thinking that your salary is your base compensation from these big companies, you're losing money by not doing the right things. My last employer had a free consultations with financial advisors. I don't know anything about stocks and bonds and all that stuff. I just have always put my money into the accounts and let the accounts do their things. So to have the flexibility to talk to somebody and really get the sound advice and education that you need, take advantage of free education when it comes your way.
So what?
Yeah, go ahead.
And this goes back to education. What role does education play now?
I think there's a lot of types of education. I think there's formal education, like we were talking about, as far as having a college education, or going into secondary ed of some sort. I think there's small training programs that you can go out and get certifications for certain things. Those are incredibly beneficial. And then I think there's on-the-job education that comes your way. Again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. There's nothing you can't be taught how to do if you're open to it, which is why the paper ceiling is the biggest lie that any job has ever told to us in society, is that you have to have a degree to even be qualified to do this job. If people are landing planes in one of the highest grossing paying jobs in the world of air traffic control with only a GED, then you can learn to be an engineer on the job. You could learn to be an oil welder on the job. You could learn all these big business. I could build an airplane if somebody told me how to do it step by step. I did it twice. I'd probably be able to do it on my own. That's not me being bold. That's me saying that the human brain is incredibly malleable to the right processes. As a trainer, I subscribe to a see one, do one, teach one mentality. Adults are very much how learners. Like, don't just tell me, well, no, they're very much why learners, is what I should say. If you can tell me why I should do it the way that you're telling me to do it, then that will last with me well beyond me watching you do it 15 times. I mean, I could watch a computer-based training on how to make a podcast, and I'd probably know the bare minimums of it. But if I watch that, and then I had you let me do one, and then I taught someone else how to do that, that is cemented in my brain. To be able to take the knowledge that you've gained and not only utilize it, but to then have to regurgitate it to somebody else, that's how you learn in today's society, is the ability to pass on your knowledge to someone else.
What can we get out of high school?
Oh, wow, so much.
Because I tell students all the time, like, don't pass up those 4 years not doing anything or just coasting, like we were talking about. You're just coasting, and when somebody comes along to challenge you, you fight against that. So you're fighting against me. You're fighting against those teachers that want to see you succeed. There's not there may be bad teachers, and you may not, but there's no teacher that has ill intentions towards your future.
I think that's absolutely true. I think what students need to remember is, from a purely financial stance, if every teacher wasn't passionate about their jobs, they wouldn't be in education. There's not a lot that they're getting back from it other than the pride of good work done and the passion to educate others. We need to treat teachers with more respect, period. That being said, what can students get out of high school education? The one thing that I didn't do was self-exploration. I knew that I liked theater, I knew that I liked music, I knew that I liked arts. I took those classes. I didn't try to explore, do I like finance? I didn't try to explore, was I good at sciences? I think there's a lot of extracurricular opportunities. I think there's a lot of clubs. We get very much focused on what we do for our social aspect, because what teenager doesn't want to hang out with their friends all the time? Of course you want to do all the same things that your friends are doing, but what if you were really good at debate and you never learned that in high school? You could be putting off a whole career in politics that you didn't know you would have excelled at. I think there's a huge amount of opportunity for exploration of self and purpose. The Japanese have a saying called ikigai, which is like, what's that one reason that you get up from bed every day? When you're young, you don't really even think about that sort of stuff. You think about, oh, I like to read, or oh, I like to play basketball. That's great, but is that your purpose in life? And I'm not saying anybody has one specific one, but at some point as you get older, you have to have a compass that directs you. And I think the more self-exploration you can do in your youth, in the security and safety of high school, in the security and safety of people who want you to succeed in the way that teachers and coaches and, educators really do, the more you can do that, the better off you're going to be. It's a foundation that is unshakable, is knowledge of self and self-awareness and confidence. The
And
more of
you
that you can get, the better off you're going to be.
You have to build that through achievement.
Yes.
So, like I said earlier, you got to go into experiences with wanting to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just say, oh, this is boring. No, you came here and you're going to finish it. And if I don't, like, I'm upset at myself, not the program or whatever. Even if the program is poorly run, I don't care.
I remember I took debate as an extracurricular in high school because a friend of mine was taking it. I was not good at it. Mm-hmm. And every day I got there and I was like, well, I guess I'm just here to socialize because I'm not very good at this thing. But it was something that I started to learn to enjoy as time went on. I was able to explore it. And if I hadn't gone in and had conversations with the teacher that was leading those clubs and been like, transparently, I'm not good at this. And they're like, actually, I think you're better than you think you are if you just applied yourself. And here's some tips on how to do that. And then still, like we said, that willingness to explore that, then I
and take some constructive criticism.
Yes, exactly.
You didn't do what you were supposed to. So
I had so much pride as a kid, and I don't mean like I'm proud of who I am. I mean like pride, blinding pride, where you're not willing to take in feedback and criticism and things like that. I think all of that comes into like a lack of self-awareness, but thankfully I've been pushed by a lot of people in my life to examine my self-awareness and been more open to those sort of, negative feedback and how to grow from that I was able to learn from that. Could I give you any advice on how to make other people feel that way? No, I don't think I could. I don't know if it comes from self-doubt. Yeah. I don't know where humility comes from.
Yeah.
But it's incredibly powerful to have humility and to be able to tap into that where it needs to happen.
So, to end this show, I think I'm still exploring I watch podcasts and
Sure.
They have that ending.
Oh yeah, the seamless wrap up.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give your 15-year-old self and your 25-year-old self? Because those are the ages where I think you need to do the most exploration and the most learning and
Absolutely.
the most physical. You got to go out there and do it.
15-year-old me, I think I would have had two pieces of advice for her. One of them, which is the world is so much bigger than you know. And if you let yourself be open to exploring it, you will become even more powerful than you ever thought that you could be. And to not be afraid of that growth, because it's very easy to picture your whole life within the world that you know it to be. Um, that's how townies are born. Like people,
Townies,
yeah, that's how people end up staying in the same place their
Yeah.
whole life because it's comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But like being open to the thought process that like you can go and grow and even come back and experience those things. So I think those are the two things, is like to know that like what you know is just an infinite piece of the whole universe, and then being open to, you know, growing and then potentially coming back and growing. Things will ebb and flow, and not to be scared of that sort of knowledge. That's what 15-year-old me would have needed to know. I don't know if she would have been able to grasp any of those concepts, or if she'd been like, okay, thank you, old lady that is in her late 30s. And then at 25, I think I had become so aware of how little I knew at that age that there was so much fear in my life. Fear of like not making enough money every month to be able to pay your bills, or like fear of knowing that you're aging. Like 25 is right around the same time that like the years start to come faster and faster, and it feels like you're at a breakneck pace. And so 25-year-old Tracy is very scared of things. I think the important thing for her would have been something to do with security, and perhaps taking the time to invest in herself and in finances and things that could provide cushions down the road. But you're so stuck in the timeline that you're in that it's hard to look outside those blinders. It's hard to be like, hey, if you invested now $100 a month, which to me would have been at 25 an unfathomable amount of money. I was like living paycheck to paycheck, and sometimes not even making it to that.
Right.
Like potentially getting into some credit card debt. Kids, do not buy credit cards. Do not get them at 18. That is a terrible decision that anybody could do. But like, I think that if I could have seen what that would have looked like 10 years down the road, I would have in a heartbeat done it if I could. But like, I was so hidden by fear. And then the minute that you have some security in your life, the minute I had like $100 to my name that I could spend, I was spending it, because it was like, it won't be there next month. You gotta use it while you have it. And so yeah, just to invest, not just financially, but then like also emotionally in myself, to build more confidence. I think when you're like 15, you're all confidence, no direction. And by the time you're 25, you have like no confidence and too many directions that you could be going into. And so I think, yeah, that would have been probably where I would have said like, hey, have a few goals in mind and steadily work towards them. And don't be afraid. You're not going to fall on your face. Or if you do, you'll just get back up. That's what happens in adulthood, is that you push in a direction until you fail at it, and then you pivot to a new direction.
Adaptability is,
yes.
is the human asset.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, just relying upon your own knowledge and knowing that you have nothing but unlimited resources at your disposal in the forms of other humans, other areas of society, things outside of the U.S. Kids are so lucky.
Internet.
Yeah, I was going to say, kids are so lucky to have the internet these days. I think there's a lot of things about it that are problematic. It makes bullying easier. It makes, a sense of loss for their innocence in a lot of ways. But to have the ability to watch somebody do a TikTok dance that lives in Japan when you live here in Kansas City is
And haven't ever left Kansas
yeah
City.
is insane. The fact that you could watch a Twitch streamer who has a completely different lifestyle to you and actually develop some sort of parasocial relationship with them, to be like, wow, I really respect and admire this person. I've never met them. They live hundreds of thousands of miles away from me, but I like what they're saying, and that's helping me grow as an individual. I just can't even pinpoint or like praise it enough to know that like they have those resources available to them. Yeah, use them, and don't be afraid to use them.
And buy the book.
Yeah. Books are another beautiful resource that, you know, they can definitely help you out. A wealth of knowledge in between some sheets of paper, if you don't have the privilege of knowing the author.
Well, I appreciate you coming out and meeting me and setting all
Yeah.
of this up, because this is my first time.
I
And
appreciate it.
the camera's a little off because
That's okay.
it
It's
sticks.
like- yeah.
No, it just sticks to the speaker.
Oh, sure.
So the first person it connects to, it stays on. I forgot about all that.
It's
But
okay.
I appreciate you wanting to
Yeah.
do it.
This
the
has been a
podcast.
pleasure, and I'm excited to watch it grow and become something even bigger than you or I could possibly imagine.
Right. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
High five or something. I don't know.
Real conversations. Real solutions. Real success. Success is my religion.